Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second session on becoming a literary translator. Can everyone hear me okay? Good? I'm close enough? Okay, so my name is Jamie Lee Searle. I'm a literary translator and a co-founder of the Emerging Translators Network, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And with me as my panellists today, I have Thomas Bunstead, who is a Spanish translator and a writer, Anna Kelly, who's assistant editor at Hamish Hamilton, and Katy, Derbyshire, who is a German translator and blogs at Love German Books. So when Rosalind Harvey, Anna Holmwood and myself set up the Emerging Translators Network in late 2011, we wanted to create an offline and online community of early career translators so that we could share guidance, resources, support for each other at a stage where often early career translators aren't yet at the point where they could make use of the Translators Association's excellent help. So we wanted to try and provide guidance for people before they get to that point in a way that would naturally flow into that organisation. And part of the incentive for doing that as well was the realisation that times have changed and translation is no longer necessarily a career that people fall into by chance. It's something that people actively seek out and pursue as a career goal and as part of their dream. So what we wanted to do today is look at some of the excellent initiatives that there are that support literary translators as they're starting out. And it's excellent that there are so many because obviously it enables much more collaboration and cooperation within the community. But perhaps it can also be a little bit confusing as well because there's so much available now, which is obviously great. So we have MAs, we have mentorships, we have translation slams and events, various schemes. So I think the best thing, because everyone's, as was mentioned yesterday, everyone's path into translation is unique. And I think one of the best things about the Translators Network has been that ability to share each other's experiences and learn from it, which I think is a great thing. So what we're going to do today is talk about some of those things, and hopefully you can gain a little bit of experience from what these people have done. And then later on we'll open it up for questions as well. So what I'd like to do first is talk about some of these schemes and initiatives. And if I could ask Katy first about your experience of getting into translation with relation to any courses you've done. Also, I know that you've both been a student of and a teacher at the BCLT Summer School. Your experiences on that?
Yeah, I am one of those people who I wanted to be a literary translator. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't fall into it by accident. And probably the first step was, for me personally, was taking part in the BCLT Summer School on literary translation, which it was the first time I took myself seriously as a literary translator, and the first time anybody else took me seriously as well. And I met some wonderful people who have, their careers have progressed along with mine, and including one of the people who has now published one of my translations, which is very exciting. So I did that. Before that, I got a diploma of translation from the University of London, a postgraduate qualification, which has helped me to find work doing commercial translation, because I'm based in Germany, where qualifications are terribly important on paper. I went to classes in translation, not on literary translation, but commercial translation, in preparation for that exam, which gave me a lot of, they were very useful, And yes, now this year for the second time, I'll be leading a workshop at the BCLT Summer School, which is a very bizarre situation to be in, frankly, and very flattering and exciting. And last year I met some wonderful people. Some of them are in the audience there, and I get a lot out of doing that workshop with the participants as well. Not just contacts, but also for my own work. I think it hasn't been, it's not all one way.
Okay, thank you. And Tom, you've been to the BCLT Summer School, which is where I met you actually, and also you were part of the TABT mentorship scheme, which is an excellent thing for early career translators. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about how the mentorship scheme helped you, if it has, and so on?
Yeah, the mentorship was amazing. I worked with Margaret Jill Costa, who's a legend, and it was great because, again, it was kind of the first. I'd done bits and pieces of translation and never really aimed at that as a career before then, and first time of sort of taking myself seriously as a translator, but sitting down with someone of Margaret's calibre and having to produce something that was half decent was a great little proving ground, but also something that helped me with, as did the summer school actually, which I sort of can't recommend highly enough, gives you an idea just of how literary translation kind of works. It's a bit of a labyrinth, but gives you an idea of kind of where the doors in are and where the doors out are, and that was really helpful too. So those two sides really, sort of actually the practice of a translator and then the business side of meeting some commissioning editors, being asked to do readers' reports, which I'm sure those of you who are trying to get into literary translation have heard those two words. Having to do those, having to sort of fit them in with other work, having to sometimes do readers' reports on quite quick turnarounds, and having Margaret sort of alongside me was helpful, amazing, yeah. I mean, yeah. And I'm translating books now, and I sort of wouldn't be, I don't think, if it hadn't been for the mentorship, really.
I know we were talking about earlier that you also did a creative writing MA, didn't you? Do you feel that that's really helped in terms of your work as a translator as well?
I suppose I'd like to bang the drum for translators as writers. It's, the good translators that we read have a very good ear and technical abilities in their own language as writers. It's hard to quantify how helpful creative writing MA was in terms of me being a writer and me being a translator, but I definitely think it's useful for translators to get, the same kind of experience as writers are recommended to get, which is life experience, doing things that aren't necessarily particularly academic, aren't particularly to do with translation, because you develop an ear, and I think that helps when you come to, translating different kinds of writers who are writing in different registers and those kinds of things. Actually, when you're younger and you haven't done that much, that can be hard. So yes, probably it was helpful. It's hard to tell.
I think often a lot of things you do on the path to being a translator, you won't actually realise at the time that it's leading towards that, but it can be something that helps. I actually met Anna quite a few years ago when I did an internship at Hamish Hamilton with her, because back then I wanted to become an editor, and obviously I ended up going in a different direction, but I think having that insight into how a publishing house worked really helped me. So that leads me to one of the things I wanted to ask you, Anna. How important would it be to you if you're, for example, looking for a translator to for commissioning a novel translation? Would you look at their background in terms of whether they've done an MA in translation or whether they've done particular, mentorship, summer schools or so on? Or to you, would it be based on just purely the quality of the sample?
It's a really good question, and it's been really interesting to hear what Katy and Tom did before in their careers. I think, first of all, if I have commissioned a translator to translate a novel for me, and it was someone who hadn't done any of this. So I can say that it's possible that I would do that because I've done it. But at the same time, it's obviously, these schemes sound, really valuable. And if you're ever trying to make a decision about something, and it's always going to be a book that you care deeply about if you're publishing it. So obviously you always want the best for that. And these schemes obviously show that a translator is committed to their career, that they're passionate and that they're doing all they can to learn as much as possible. So, of course, as an editor, I would be impressed by these things. I think one thing I would say is maybe that as a translator, it's probably important not to overestimate the knowledge of an editor about what all these schemes actually are, because if you're talking about things that you've done, it's probably quite sensible to kind of assume a certain degree of ignorance on the part of the editor and kind of explain exactly what the BCLT summer school is and what that brought for you, because the editor might not know, or might be kind of going very quickly. And it was also interesting to hear about the mentorship scheme, because I think that's one way in which if you're trying to kind of instantly impress upon an editor that you have certain skills, or that your skills lie in a certain area, being able to say, Margaret Jill Costa was my mentor and she would recommend me, I think is the kind of thing that would instantly make an editor sit up and take notice, because they obviously only have so many hours in their day, and if it's something that they already know, then I think that's very valuable. In exactly the same way that one of the reasons creative writing MAs are so useful for young writers is because, if they can say, well, Ali Smith says I'm great, then you think, oh, well, that's quite interesting, and you instantly take notice. So I think it's a similar principle.
Okay. I think when it comes to building relationships with publishers and promoting books we love, that's often something that people ask a lot of questions about at these events. And I think many of us who have been to these panels before might have heard conflicting advice on the best way to promote the books we love. And I've definitely heard a number of translators, established translators, say that you should prepare these information packs which have the sample translations, synopsis of the book, translations of promotional material from the country of origin and so on. But at the same time, you often hear a lot of established translators say, well, I've never gotten a commission from doing that. I've never found it actually works. So I find there are often quite conflicting ideas there. So I'd be quite interested to see from Katy and Tom's perspective, if they do that, if they've ever had any success in that, and then I'll speak to Anna again about how you like to be approached on that. Katy, would you like to pitch in on this one?
I used to do it, and I don't do it anymore.
Okay. Did you have any luck with it?
No, I didn't have any luck with it. It was... The good thing about it was because was at the time I needed to build up more experience, so I got more experience, and I was translating things that I loved and pitching it to publishers and putting together these beautiful glossy, almost brochures, and sending them off, and everybody said, oh, very interesting. But nobody said, it's very interesting, let's publish it. And I don't do it anymore. What I do now is I write this blog, Love German Books, and I will big up the books I love all the time to the point of embarrassment on there, and then I will work with foreign rights people at the German publishers, because they're the professionals. They have the contacts. They have much better contacts than I have. I will work with the cultural institutions, with the Goethe Institute and their magazine, New Books in German. We were talking yesterday, Jamie and I, about a book that is coming out in July that I translated, and that's my biggest placement success, Plan D by Simon Urban, I suppose we have to call him in English, which came about in that way that I wrote a report for the Goethe Institute's magazine, made a video with the German Book Office where I talked about the book, and wrote a report on it, or a kind of a glowing appraisal of it on my blog, and then on the back of all that recommended it to an editor who I know, and she bought it for Havel Seckel. Then she left. Oh, so that's not going to work again. But for me, it was a huge amount of effort, although it wasn't the actual the translation work was a good thing. I was enjoying it. It was the pitching was incredibly frustrating, and that's why I don't do it anymore. I will try and place extracts or chapters or short stories in magazines, because then I think, okay, an editor can see that and we'll see it in English. It's been curated to some extent. Somebody at the magazine has said this is good enough to go in our magazine, whether it's an online magazine or a print or just specializing in translation or whatever. It's that piece is good enough for someone to want to publish it already. I hope that helps. It did help with Clemens Meyer, who there was a story in The Guardian a couple of years ago, and then the book got published. I think there are other ways to go about it, which are possibly less frustrating.
So you found your individual way that works for you, which is good, and also is it not? Okay. You hear me now? Okay. So you found a way that works for you, which is good, and also I think a big part of that is the relationships that you're building with the publishers anyway. Tom, did you want to say something on that, or were you saying that was the same?
I'd reiterate that. I mean, it's good when you're having conversations with publishers to be able to sort of say, I've got a couple of writers that I'm really excited by. I've spoken to far more experienced translators than myself who have said, it took a couple of decades before publishers actually began to listen to the things that I was excited about in terms of deciding to commission them. I would second that idea of, if you're into a writer, why not translate a story by them, try and get it published. So places like the Quarterly Conversation, Words Without Borders, obviously, but there are also mainly English language journals who are crying out for translated literature. People like PN Review, the White Review now, although they're not publishing that much stuff. There are people who will take the stuff, and then on the back of that, it's already had something of a seal of approval, and then publishers will say, it's out there, and they'll take it a bit more seriously than if it's just kind of something that you've got in your drawer and you're like, oh, I love this, and they're like, who are you? I'd say that's one way of doing it. But obviously, and other stories have got a totally different model, and I'm sure people sort of know about them. But it does seem to go the other way. It tends to be that the flow is from the publishers saying, we found that we're interested in that in this book. And the translator might be involved in that by providing reports, but mainly, and maybe in the Q&A people can sort of contradict this, but the flow seems to be in that direction mainly. Which is not to say, it's not really important to know what's happening in the scene of your source language and to be excited about things.
Anna, how would you take notice of someone coming to you with one of these kind of info packs if you didn't already have an existing relationship with them?
I think it's quite difficult. I mean, I would obviously, try to pay attention to anything that someone was bringing to my notice, but at the same time, if that submission is competing with however many other hundreds of submissions that have come in from established UK agents or international agents or foreign rights directors who I already have a relationship and talk to at book fairs, then I suppose there is always the danger that it might get slightly lost among those other projects, and also that in a way it seems, in comparison to maybe someone at a German publisher saying, this is a novel we've published to massive acclaim in Germany, we've sold it these places all over the world, and in a way it sounds cynical and boring, but kind of talking publishing language to me, then it's very quick. You communicate in a kind of shorthand, and as well as talking about the book being brilliant, because of course that's at the heart of everything, they also understand the things that are important on the maybe slightly slightly more practical level, whereas sometimes perhaps a translator, I mean, many translators are very savvy about the publishing industry, and I mean, you have to be, but I think maybe it might seem more like, the passion project of an individual as opposed to kind of something that's being brought to you with a lot of context and a lot of understanding of how you would publish this book. So I think basically the way I feel is, it feels as though Tom and Katy are kind of saying, coming from quite a similar position, and I think what they say is quite sensible, really. But I wouldn't ignore things, but it seems like there are other ways that are possibly more effective.
I translate from Spanish to English, and then the rest of the question is just about sort of the creative element of...
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, translators are writers, with another language, and without that component which writers have, which is the desire to tell their own story, and the need to sort of write their own things. But I mean, you need to have the sort of
work on the translation. They will follow all the track of the writers. They will try to do what the writer wanted to say. But as an author, you can make some changes because you are an author. How do you work with this one during your translation process?
Do you mean the author wanting to
as
amend the translation?
As a business, as an art, just tech methods can you use during your translation, your own creation, I mean?
What methods? I mean, I suppose it's a sort of a subtle and a slightly mysterious thing, how someone develops their own... It's to do with your own taste, really, isn't it? I mean, and that comes out of all the reading that you've done, ever. Every book that you've read sort of is at the nib of your pen when you're writing, and that's...
I think there's another question just behind.
Hi. Could I ask Anna what you look for in a reader's report? What makes a good reader's report for you? And ask the translators who've done them how you go about doing them, please.
Thank you. I think one thing to say that is really, really important, and also just links into other things that Katy has spoken about in terms of writing a blog, is, and also many things that Tom has said. One of the things I would look for is someone who can write, because that is just of paramount importance. And if someone writes a shoddy reading report with crap grammar, and then I know they're going to be a really bad translator. And I'm not saying I ever have had reports like that, but if that were to happen, then obviously that would be very off-putting. And the basic things to include in a reader's report are a brief, succinct plot summary, a description of what the main themes are of the book, why it personally makes you passionate about it, and why you want to translate it. But also, as an editor working for a publishing company, it's important to me to also have some knowledge of how it would fit into the UK publishing market. So if it reminds you of another book, or if it seems to, maybe fall between two other books or have elements of anything else, then that's always very useful to know. I mean, it can be a bit of a dodgy business, the whole kind of comparing books to other books, because one of the things I find most frustrating about working in publishing is that in a lot of our meetings, and everyone does it, and I've done it as well, people tend to walk around and say, this is an absolutely, completely original book, like nothing else before. It's kind of a cross between The Catcher in the Rye and The Help. And yeah, I think, oh gosh, what am I doing? But however, if you can manage to bear that paradox, then a bit of help in that direction is good. So yeah, I think those are the main things to include.
Can I just ask a very quick follow-up question, which is that could be quite a long document. Are you happy to receive those cold if it turns out to be a thick bundle?
I would say if you can try to keep it to, I don't think it would want to be more than like a kind of couple of pages of A4 usually. And most people don't tend to write very long reports. Thank you.
But in terms of sending someone a cold reader's report without having had any contact with them, I would say that's probably not a good idea, because people in Anna's position, you're kind of giving them however glowing, the thing is, they see someone sent an an uninvited 2 or 3 or 4 page thing, they might not reply. So go initially with some kind of contact, maybe a sentence or two about, not this is the new J.D. Salinger, but, J.D. Salinger's readership would probably go for this kind of thing, and he's done really well in his own country, and do you want to hear more?
My advice about writing readers' reports is also sometimes to just write, this is not a good book, don't publish it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that as well. Because even you have to be very genuine to build up the relationship with the publisher. So if they've approached you about a book, they might be slightly interested. But even if you have no work whatsoever and you're really trying to find some work, if you don't like the book, then don't pretend to like it, because this is going to be a very long relationship that you're starting off. So you have to be genuine. And
they won't decide just on your report.
Yeah.
They'll gather a picture together from various different sources. So
okay.
Be honest with your
Okay, I think we have one more question just down here. If we could get there. Oh, okay. Okay, one here and then we'll go down there. Okay.
Deborah Langton, I live in Germany as well, and I was very interested, Katy, to hear you saying that you work with the foreign rights people in the German publisher. And I found that very encouraging, because I always find it quite difficult to know where to put the emphasis, whether I should be spending all my time trying to talk to the English publishers and coming over here to do it, or whether I should be spending all my time talking to the German publishers. And some people are nodding as if that's something you've wondered about too, and I did want to ask it today. So I was particularly interested to hear you said that you do seem to put your emphasis on the German publishers.
Yeah, to some extent, because it's not actually an advantage in commercial terms to live in the country whose literature you translate. I think it's good for various other reasons, and why not make use of that tiny weeny advantage that has? And yes, they're mostly delightful people and very professional and a pleasure to work with. And most of them are looking for translators for their samples that they send to international publishers. That's a good way to get practice.
Oh, I've done a bit.
Yes. Yeah, and sometimes you do things you don't like. Sometimes you discover amazing jewels. I found that very, very productive. And in fact, my very first published translation came from one of those samples that I did of a young adult novel, and the British publisher then commissioned me with the entire translation.
Thank you very much.
Rosie Gillette, I'm an audio-visual translator. I hope this is not going to be one of Tom's stupid questions, or one of the stupid questions Tom mentioned, I should say. Yeah. You were talking about, thinking about looking at a piece of literature with a view to translate it with a view to trying to place it in a magazine. What's the sort of copyright issue on something like that? Is it up to the translator to ask permission from the original author or original publisher to translate?
I'm trying to think of the examples that I've done. I've already sort of been in contact. Yeah, I've checked with the publishers whether the rights are available and if they're happy for me to go ahead and sort of hawk it around. But then on other occasions, you might have the magazine itself, either if they ask you to do it, or perhaps if that's their setup, they'll sort out the rights, the magazine.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Certainly I'd say always contact the rights holder, usually the publisher, unless it's poetry. I
sort of mean the second case, if the magazines ask you to do it, you in that case.
Oh, okay. But even before, maybe not before you do to a short translation, but just so you know, if maybe somebody else is also interested in translating that writer, and you might not want to get into that competitive situation there.
Okay, we did have another question, but it was the same one, so it was answered by that. I know Danny wants to jump in.
Very quickly, is there a... Can I... just a second. Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
Come away
better. Okay, I'm going to talk very quickly. The only thing I wanted to say, really, one of the things that's always been really exciting about the Translation Centre, as you will gather from the number of people who are here, this is our 4th year and it's always been really, really full, really crowded and really buzzy. The kind of support we get from translators, from publishers, the kind of contribution we get from people who are willing to come here to speak on panels and that kind of thing has made the Translation Centre what it is. And I wanted to mention, at the risk of making an enemy today, that of all the people for whom we are very grateful for being here today, it's Katy's birthday. And so of all the people who should have better things to do with the day today, Katy is spending her birthday with us, which is a really terrible idea. But nonetheless, when you thank the whole panel, do please, I'm not going to make you sing for her, but do please, though I contemplated that, but do please especially be thanking Katy when you're thanking everyone, because she really shouldn't be here. But please, now I think join me in thanking the whole panel, Jamie and Tom and Anna and Katy.
Thank you, everybody.